Curly, Wurly, and the Not-So-Great White Shark. Early one morning, Mr. Lobster, the lighthouse keeper, was sitting in Mrs. Crabbly's cafe, drinking a nice hot mug of cocoa. Mrs. Crabbly had also made him some beans on toast for his breakfast. Finally, she picked up the newspaper that had just been put through her letterbox. When she read the main headline in the paper, she shrieked and jumped into the air. The newspaper pages were scattered everywhere. "Jumping jellyfish! What's the matter, Shirley?" asked Mr. Lobster, who almost spilt his lovely hot mug of cocoa over himself. "There's been a sighting of a great white shark in the waters just off Barracuda Bay," she said. "A great white! Here, just offshore. We must close the beaches." "Don't be daft, Shirley," said Mr. Lobster. Just then, he got off his seat and smiled. "Did you say a great white shark?" he asked excitedly. "Yes," replied Mrs. Crabbly nervously. "Excellent! He's back! Gary is back!" Mr. Lobster was so thrilled at the news that he quickly finished his cocoa and beans on toast and dashed off out the cafe. Mrs. Crabbly looked confused. "Gary? Who's Gary? Where are you off to?" she shouted. "To find the great white shark," came the faint reply. To help him find the shark, Mr. Lobster asked his friends Curly and Wurly. Soon the planes were flying high in the sky. They flew right across the bay and out towards Mr. Lobster's lighthouse. Further out to sea, they circled Bird Island, but there was no sign of any great white sharks. "Bother," said Mr. Lobster. "Let's try Shark Bite Cove," he said. "If a great white will be anywhere, it'll be swimming in there." So Curly and Wurly took Mr. Lobster to Shark Bite Cove. It was a small lagoon surrounded by large rocks and boulders. "During the spring and summer, the lagoon attracts a lot of smaller sharks," he said. "The waters are usually calmer and the sharks use it as a nursery. On the very rare and special occasions, a bigger shark will make its way into Sharkbite Cove. Hopefully, we will see something special today," he added. Suddenly, Wurly spotted a large shark-shaped figure swimming towards the lagoon. "Mr. Lobster! Mr. Lobster, look down there!" "Well, bless me! It's him! He's back! It's Gary!" "Curly, please take me down. I want you to meet a very old friend of mine," said Mr. Lobster happily. Curly and Wurly landed safely, close to the cove. Meanwhile, Mr. Lobster clambered down some rocks and started whistling. "What's he doing?" asked Curly to Wurly. "I've no idea," replied Wurly curiously. They watched on as Mr. Lobster did something rather extraordinary. He began to tap the rocks and his whistling got faster and louder. Suddenly, a big scary-looking head popped up onto the surface of the water. It was a great white shark. But Mr. Lobster wasn't scared at all. In fact, he was having a conversation with it. Now, did you know that Mr. Lobster was not an ordinary lighthouse keeper? He had magic powers that allowed him to talk to all the animals that lived under the sea. Amazing! But Mr. Lobster could see that the shark didn't look happy. "Hello, Gary, my old friend. It's good to see you. Why do you look so glum?" "Hello, Mr. Lobster," sighed Gary sadly. "It's just that whenever I return, huge crowds arrive and they make so much noise, it scares me away. I do like my peace and quiet, but I also like seeing my old friends here too." "I see," pondered Mr. Lobster. "Let me cheer you up. I want you to meet Curly and Wurly." "Hello," smiled Gary nicely. The two planes could see that Gary wasn't scary at all. However, he was starting to feel hungry. News soon spread across Barracuda Bay that a great white shark was in the waters. An enormous crowd turned up at Sharkbite Cove to see Gary. Even Mr. Ray was there too. Everyone turned up, apart from Mrs. Crabbly, who stayed in her cafe making sandwiches. A TV crew were there to film the great white. They were hoping to get a shot of him feeding. The noise level increased, and the crowds got bigger and louder. "Have you got the shots?" asked the TV director to a cameraman. "I want one of it feeding." The TV director had a very loud voice. Poor Gary was so scared, he swam out of the lagoon. "Shh, everyone! You scared him away!" Mr. Lobster scrambled over some rocks and found Gary looking upset in the waters beside. "It's okay, I've got a plan," and he whispered it to Gary. Then Mr. Lobster returned to the lagoon. "You all came here today to see a great white shark in action, and here he is. Meet Gary. Say hello, Gary." "Hello!" There was a loud gasp of silence. One look at Gary's razor-sharp teeth, and everyone disappeared. "Ha ha ha!" chuckled Mr. Lobster. "That worked perfectly. Now, Gary, you can swim around and eat your breakfast in peace and quiet." "Thank you," he said happily. "See you again very soon. Goodbye, Curly. Goodbye, Wurly. I'll be back again." Soon Gary was swimming far out to sea. Thanks to the magical Mr. Lobster and his 2 friendly planes, the not-so-great white shark was feeling great again. Great work, everybody! And that is the end of the story. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.